Imagine boarding a flight, settling into your seat, only for the pilot to demand that you, a black woman, move for no reason. Most people would quietly comply, but not her. Instead, she shocked the entire crew with a single bold move, ordering a full flight audit right there on the plane. What happened next left passengers speechless and the airline scrambling. Stay with me, because this story will change the way you see air travel forever. Before we dive into how this unbelievable flight drama began, pause for just a second. Hit like if you believe every passenger deserves respect. Tap subscribe so you never miss stories that expose hidden racism, and smash that notification bell. Because every view, every share, every subscriber is a step toward change. The cabin lights glowed a warm amber as passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle, tucking bags into overhead bins and claiming their seats. Outside the windows, dusk draped New York's JFK runway in a haze of orange and silver. Engines hummed softly in the background, a steady reminder that soon this metal bird would leap across the country. Danielle Parker adjusted her black tote beneath the seat in front of her and exhaled, a deep, steady breath she'd been holding since the security line. This wasn't just another cross-country trip. In less than 12 hours, she was scheduled to pitch a multi-million-dollar project to a room full of executives in Los Angeles. Missing this flight wasn't an option. She checked her watch, 7:45 p.m., and replayed the hectic day in her mind. An early morning client call in Midtown, a frantic cab ride through Manhattan traffic, the endless shuffle through security. Yet despite the stress, she'd arrived on time, boarding pass in hand, seat 12C confirmed. Sliding into the aisle seat, Danielle offered a polite smile to the man by the window, a tall Chicago businessman named Mark Johnson, who returned the smile with an easy nod. The middle seat remained empty, and she silently hoped it would stay that way. As the final passengers trickled aboard, a flicker of unease caught her attention. A gate agent appeared at the front of the cabin, whispering to a flight attendant. Their eyes darted toward her row, then quickly shifted away. A subtle double take. Danielle felt it, an almost invisible tension, like the air itself had tightened. She tried to brush it off. Maybe they were discussing seating upgrades. Maybe a routine weight check. Still, the small hairs on her arms prickled. The PA crackled to life, and the captain's voice rolled through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. I need to speak with a passenger in row 12. Conversations froze. Heads turned. Row 12, her row. Danielle's pulse quickened. She straightened her posture, forcing a calm she didn't fully feel. Her grandmother's voice echoed in memory, "Grace is power. Don't let anyone shake yours." A tall figure in a crisp navy uniform stepped into the aisle, the pilot himself. Not the usual disembodied voice behind the cockpit door, but the person in command of the entire flight. His expression carried the kind of authority that expected instant obedience. "Ma'am," he said firmly, stopping beside her seat, "I'm going to need you to change seats. Now." The cabin fell silent. No explanation. No smile. Just a cold directive that sliced through the hum of the plane. Danielle blinked, her mind racing. Mark looked at her, eyes widening in confusion. A passenger across the aisle quietly raised a phone, camera light glowing faintly. Danielle met the pilot's gaze, steady and unflinching. "Is there a reason I'm being asked to move?" His jaw tightened. "For operational necessity," he said flatly. "Please collect your belongings." No reason. No specifics. Just an order. Passengers leaned forward, sensing the tension. Some whispered, others held their breath. Danielle inhaled slowly, her grandmother's words echoing louder now. She knew in that instant she had a choice: obey without question, or stand her ground. Most people would have quietly complied. But Danielle Parker was not most people. She placed her hands calmly on the armrests, locked eyes with the pilot, and said in a voice that carried across the silent cabin, "Then I'd like to request a flight audit, effective immediately." A ripple of gasps traveled through the rows. The pilot froze. Flight attendants exchanged startled glances. Phones tilted higher as passengers captured the moment that would soon ignite headlines across the country. And that was only the beginning. A ripple of gasps traveled through the rows. The pilot froze. Flight attendants exchanged startled glances. Phones tilted higher as passengers captured the moment that would soon ignite headlines across the country. And that was only the beginning. The pilot's brow tightened, his voice sharper now. "Ma'am, this is not the time for games. Please cooperate so we can depart on schedule." Danielle didn't flinch. "I am fully cooperating," she replied, her tone measured but unmistakably firm. Under FAA regulations, a flight audit can be requested if a passenger is targeted without valid operational cause. "I'm invoking that right." A collective murmur spread through the cabin. Passengers who moments ago were silent now whispered in disbelief. A man in business attire leaned into the aisle to record. A young woman across the row mouthed the words "flight audit" to her seatmate. The lead flight attendant stepped forward, tablet clutched tight. Her voice tried for calm but betrayed an edge of panic. "Captain, maybe we should clarify the situation before." The pilot cut her off. "This is my aircraft. We maintain order." His eyes snapped back to Danielle. "If you refuse to move, you are obstructing departure and subject to removal." Danielle raised a single hand, palm outward. "I am not refusing to comply with safety procedures. I am requesting documentation. If this is an operational necessity, provide the regulation code and reason for reseating. Otherwise, this is discrimination, and I will file a federal complaint the moment we land, or sooner if Wi-Fi allows." Gasps deepened. Several passengers clapped softly, a hesitant show of support. The pilot's jaw flexed. He reached for his radio. "Ground, this is Flight 482, requesting security presence at gate." Before he finished, a voice crackled through his earpiece, audible to those nearest the cockpit door. "Captain Holt, this is operations. Passenger requests for audit must be logged. Stand by for directive." The pilot hesitated, frozen mid-sentence. The authority in operations tone undercut his own. Danielle seized the opening. "Until that directive arrives, I remain in my assigned seat, per my boarding pass." Mark, the man by the window, finally spoke. "She's right. She's not moving. And I'll be filing a witness statement." Phones tilted higher. The atmosphere shifted from tension to collective anticipation. The lead attendant's tablet chimed. A message flashed across the screen. Her eyes widened as she read. "Captain," she said carefully, "operations is requesting a verification sweep of seat assignments before departure." The pilot exhaled sharply, his grip on authority slipping in real time. "This will delay us," he muttered. Danielle's gaze remained steady. Better a delay than silent discrimination. The attendant nodded stiffly and turned to the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be conducting a brief audit of all passenger seat assignments. Please remain seated and have your boarding passes ready." Applause broke out, first scattered, then growing. Some passengers called out encouragement. "Stand your ground." About time someone said something. The pilot glared at Danielle but said nothing. He stepped back toward the cockpit, shoulders tight, radio still in hand. Danielle exhaled slowly, heart pounding but face composed. The flight audit she demanded was now underway. And the real test of the airline's integrity was just beginning. Two uniformed ground supervisors stepped onto the aircraft, clipboards in hand, their reflective vests cutting through the dim cabin light. Conversations fell silent again as they made their way to the center aisle. "Good evening, everyone," the taller supervisor announced. "We've been instructed by operations to conduct a rapid verification of all passenger seat assignments. Please have your boarding passes ready for inspection. This will only take a few minutes." The lead flight attendant moved aside, relief flickering across her face as the authority shifted. The pilot remained at the cockpit entrance, arms folded, eyes locked on Danielle. The supervisors began at the front row, scanning boarding passes against a handheld device. A quiet beep confirmed each match. Row by row, the audit moved closer to Danielle's seat. Passengers complied quickly, some smiling, some whispering words of support as they handed over their documents. When they reached row 12, the taller supervisor crouched slightly to meet Danielle's gaze. "Ma'am, boarding pass, please." Danielle retrieved it from her bag and handed it over without a word. The scanner beeped once, then displayed a bright green checkmark. Seat 12C, confirmed, he said, loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. Mark handed his over next, another green check. The middle seat remained unassigned, as expected. The supervisor looked to the pilot. All seats in this row match the manifest. The pilot's jaw tightened. Continue the sweep. The audit continued down the cabin. Halfway through the rear section, the device emitted a sharp, unexpected error tone. A passenger in row 21 fumbled with his bag, producing a boarding pass that didn't match the assigned manifest. Sir, the shorter supervisor said, your ticket shows seat 18A. How did you board with 21C? The man stammered. Gate agent said move wherever. Said it was fine. The supervisor exchanged a look with his colleague. There was no authorization for free reseating tonight. Please return to your assigned seat immediately. Passengers murmured again, clear evidence of irregularity. Phones captured every word. The taller supervisor tapped his radio. Operations, we have a misseated passenger in 21C. Possible gate override. Continuing audit. Danielle held her breath, the pattern emerging before everyone's eyes. This wasn't a simple seating adjustment. It was a chain of unchecked decisions that had singled her out while others moved freely. The supervisors completed the final rows. 3 more errors surfaced. Passengers reseated without record, each claiming gate instructions. None involved row 12. The taller supervisor straightened and faced the pilot. Captain, audit complete. For manifest discrepancies, none in seat 12C. Passenger Parker is confirmed and compliant. There is no operational necessity to move her. The cabin erupted in low applause. Mark joined in, clapping steadily until others followed. The pilot's face reddened, his authority unraveling in full view of 100 witnesses. This is delaying our departure, he said sharply. The supervisor didn't flinch. Then we recommend addressing the gate mismanagement rather than targeting a confirmed passenger. Danielle kept her eyes on the pilot, her voice steady but cutting through the cabin. So, Captain, will we be departing now, or would you prefer I escalate this to the Department of Transportation before takeoff? The pilot stared back, silent. The taller supervisor finally turned to the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume normal boarding procedures. Thank you for your patience. Please remain seated as we finalize paperwork. The pilot retreated into the cockpit, the door closing with a heavy metallic click. Danielle leaned back against her seat, heart racing but posture unbroken. The flight audit had exposed the cracks. But the night, and the fight for accountability, was far from over. The cabin doors sealed with a hollow thud, and the engines rumbled to life. Passengers settled back, but the tension never fully released. Phones stayed in recording mode, eyes flicking toward row 12 where Danielle sat poised, alert. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the lead flight attendant approached with a forced smile. Ms. Parker, the captain would like a word with you once we're airborne. Danielle met her gaze evenly. Then he can speak here with witnesses. I will not enter the cockpit or any private area. The attendant hesitated, then retreated toward the galley, whispering into her intercom. Takeoff rolled into a steep climb. Seatbelts clicked tight as the aircraft pierced the night sky. The familiar chime of cruising altitude sounded, but the intercom stayed silent. No welcome message. No captain's update. Only the steady hum of engines. Minutes later, the lead attendant returned, voice low but firm. The captain insists on speaking with you privately. He says it concerns flight safety. Danielle shook her head. My safety is here, with witnesses. If he has concerns, he may address the cabin. Several passengers nodded in agreement. Mark leaned forward. She's not going anywhere alone. Tell him to speak here or not at all. The attendant's jaw tightened. She disappeared again. Moments later, the cockpit door opened halfway. The pilot stepped into the aisle, eyes sharp, shoulders squared. Ms. Parker, he said, projecting over the hum of the cabin, your earlier actions disrupted a federal flight operation. I have the authority to issue a written incident report that could place you on a no-fly list. Gasps rippled through the rows. Danielle stood, slow and deliberate, keeping her voice controlled. And I have the right to report targeted harassment by a licensed pilot to both the Department of Transportation and the FAA. Shall we exchange paperwork now, or after landing? The pilot stiffened. You're threatening federal action? I'm exercising federal rights, she replied. A passenger near the front raised his phone higher. She's got every right, Captain. We all saw what happened. Another voice followed. Try putting her on a list and we'll testify. The pilot scanned the cabin, eyes meeting a wall of silent, recording faces. His authority, once absolute, now teetered under public scrutiny. Danielle remained standing, seatbelt light glowing overhead. If you believe I violated a safety regulation, cite the specific code. Otherwise, I request you return to your duties and allow this flight to continue without intimidation. For a beat, the only sound was the thrum of engines. The pilot's grip tightened on the seat back, but no words followed. His gaze dropped first. Without another comment, he turned sharply and disappeared behind the cockpit door. The latch sealed with a metallic snap. Applause erupted, louder than before. Passengers cheered, some chanting her name. Danielle slowly sat, heart pounding but face composed. Mark leaned closer and whispered, "You just stared down a captain at 30,000 feet. The intercom crackled a moment later. A different male voice, operations, came through. Ladies and gentlemen, this is ground control. Your flight will proceed as scheduled. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." The pilot did not return. Danielle exhaled, steadying herself. The confrontation was won, but the aftermath, and the reckoning that awaited the airline on landing, had only begun. The seatbelt sign chimed as the plane began its descent into Los Angeles. Passengers packed away phones and belongings, but many kept their devices ready to capture what might unfold once the doors opened. Danielle sat upright, her boarding pass still tucked in the seat pocket, a quiet proof of her legitimacy. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We will be taxiing to gate C12. Remain seated until we reach the gate." His voice was tight, clipped, every word carefully measured. As the wheels touched down and the brakes engaged, Danielle spotted flashing lights through the window, 2 airport security vehicles parked beside the jet bridge. Passengers exchanged wary glances. Someone muttered, "They called security." The aircraft eased to a stop. The cabin lights brightened. The door unlocked with a hiss. Before anyone could stand, 2 transportation security officers boarded, accompanied by an airline operations manager in a navy blazer. "Ms. Danielle Parker?" the manager called, scanning the rows. Danielle rose slowly. "I'm here." The taller officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're here to ensure a safe and orderly deplaning. You are not under arrest. We need a brief statement regarding the in-flight incident." Danielle nodded once. "I'll provide a statement with witnesses present." Passengers stirred in support. Mark stood with her. "I witnessed everything and will testify." The operations manager's gaze swept the cabin, catching the dozens of phones still recording. His tone softened immediately. "Ms. Parker, our team will escort you to a private lounge for documentation. You have the right to bring a witness." Danielle remained calm. "I will provide a statement only in a neutral, public space. No closed doors." The taller officer gave a single nod. "Understood. We can use the gate desk in view of passengers." As they prepared to disembark, the cockpit door opened. The pilot stepped out, face flushed. "Ms. Parker," he said, voice low but carrying through the silent cabin, "I need you to know this wasn't personal. It was procedure." Danielle met his eyes without hesitation. "Procedure requires transparency, Captain. Tonight exposed the absence of it." A ripple of approval moved through the passengers. Someone clapped, others followed. The pilot's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He turned back toward the cockpit, shoulders rigid. Danielle walked down the aisle flanked by the officers, passengers offering quiet words of encouragement as she passed. "Good for you. Make them answer for it." You stood for all of us. At the gate desk, cameras continued rolling as the operations manager began the formal process. For the record, Ms. Parker, your boarding pass and seat assignment were valid. 4 seating irregularities were discovered unrelated to your row. The airline will be launching an internal review effective immediately. Danielle kept her voice steady, each word deliberate. Then document my statement, I was targeted without cause. I am filing an FAA discrimination complaint, and I expect a written apology and public acknowledgement from your airline. The manager's pen froze mid-note. We will comply with all federal reporting requirements. Security officers exchanged looks but said nothing. Behind them, more passengers gathered near the gate, some live streaming the exchange to social media. Notifications pinged from every corner, news alerts, trending hashtags, live reactions. The manager glanced nervously at the crowd. Ms. Parker, corporate relations will contact you within 24 hours to resolve this matter. Danielle signed the incident form with a steady hand. Good. Because this conversation isn't ending at this gate. A final chime from a nearby phone cut through the tense silence. Hashtag Flight Audit was already trending nationally. The airline's crisis had just left the runway. Within an hour of landing, videos from the flight flooded social media. Clips of the pilot's demand, the in-cabin audit, and Danielle's calm defiance spread across X, TikTok, and Instagram. By the time she reached the terminal exit, hashtag Flight Audit had surpassed 1 million views and was trending in multiple states. Outside Gate C12, a cluster of local reporters had already gathered. Microphones and camera lights snapped on as Danielle stepped into the corridor, flanked by Mark and 2 TSA officers. Miss Parker, did the pilot target you because of race? A reporter shouted. Danielle faced the cameras without breaking stride. I was ordered to move without cause. The audit confirmed my seat was valid. You can draw your own conclusions. The TSA officers cleared a path, but the questions kept coming. Will you sue the airline? Did the pilot apologize? Danielle stopped just long enough to answer. There has been no apology. My next step is a formal complaint with the FAA. Her statement went live within minutes. National outlets picked up the clip, headline banners flashing across evening broadcasts. Passenger orders flight audit after pilot demands seat change. Inside the airline's operations center in Dallas, executives scrambled. Emails marked urgent flooded the chain. The vice president of customer integrity ordered an immediate crisis meeting. Screens displayed side-by-side feeds of viral videos and mounting public outrage. Do we have the pilot's report? One executive demanded. A manager replied, voice tight. He cited operational necessity, but gave no supporting data. The audit log contradicts his claim. Legal exposure? Another asked. Hi, came the answer. Potential FAA investigation for discriminatory action. The CEO joined via video link, face drawn. Prepare a public statement within the hour. Offer contact with the passenger. Begin internal disciplinary review. At the same moment in Los Angeles, Danielle's phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, media requests, and an email from Airworld Corporate Relations lit up her screen. Ms. Parker, the email read, we are deeply concerned by tonight's events and request an urgent meeting to discuss resolution. Mark glanced at her phone. They're already in damage control. Before Danielle could reply, another notification flashed, CNN requesting live interview tonight. Airport security escorted her through a side corridor toward the car service area, but the crowd outside the gate had grown thicker. Passengers who filmed the confrontation were now live streaming to tens of thousands of viewers. Near the exit, a regional operations director in a gray suit intercepted her, breathless. Ms. Parker, I'm with Airworld leadership. We want to issue a formal apology and arrange compensation for your experience. Could we speak privately? Danielle's eyes stayed level. Your company can apologize publicly, the same way this humiliation went public. Anything else can wait for my legal counsel. The director hesitated, glancing at the cameras closing in. Understood. We'll release a statement tonight. Danielle stepped into her waiting car as flashes lit the sidewalk. Behind her, The director pulled out a phone and began dictating a draft. Airworld Airlines deeply regrets the incident aboard Flight 482 and has placed the operating pilot on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Inside the car, Danielle exhaled, watching the airport lights recede. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a direct message from a national civil rights attorney offering representation. The crisis team scrambled to contain the fire, but public judgment was already underway. And as the night stretched on, the question hanging over the airline wasn't just about one pilot's decision. It was whether the company could survive the storm that was now consuming every screen in America. By dawn, federal agencies were already moving. The FAA announced a preliminary inquiry into Flight 482, citing credible allegations of discriminatory conduct by operating crew. Hours later, the Department of Transportation confirmed a parallel civil rights investigation. Airworld's corporate headquarters in Dallas became a war room. Lawyers, PR specialists, and senior executives gathered in a glass conference room as breaking news alerts flashed across a wall of monitors. Stock prices slid 3% in the first hour of trading. Damage is accelerating, a risk officer warned. FAA inspectors want the flight log and crew communications by noon. The CEO's reply was blunt. Cooperate fully. Contain the pilot exposure. Begin outreach to Ms. Parker's counsel immediately. But Danielle had already moved first. Before sunrise, her newly retained attorney filed a formal federal complaint with the FAA and DOT, citing unlawful discrimination and abuse of authority. A press release followed, detailing her demand for a full public audit of Airworld's training policies and flight procedures. News outlets seized the filing within minutes. Cable networks ran side-by-side footage of Danielle invoking the audit and the pilot threatening a no-fly report. Commentators debated the legal consequences live on morning shows. Airworld issued its first official statement at 8:15 a.m. Airworld Airlines condemns all forms of discrimination. The pilot involved has been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending investigation. The statement failed to calm the backlash. Social feeds exploded with calls for a boycott. High-profile activists amplified the videos, tagging federal officials and demanding congressional hearings. By mid-morning, Danielle's attorney received an unexpected call from a senior counsel at the FAA. "We're expediting review," the official said. "We need every passenger witness statement and the complete audit file. We intend to interview the pilot within 48 hours." Outside the FAA building in Washington, reporters shouted questions to spokespeople who refused to comment beyond the pending investigation. Meanwhile, Airworld's internal communications leaked to the press. Emails revealed gate mismanagement and seat overrides hours before boarding, proof that operational chaos, not safety, triggered the confrontation. Cable news tickers lit up. FAA subpoenas Airworld records. Civil rights violation possible. At noon, a live press conference erupted outside the Los Angeles terminal where Danielle first landed. Flanked by her attorney and several passengers who volunteered as witnesses, she faced a wall of cameras. "My rights were violated at 30,000 feet, she declared. "This is not just about one seat. It's about accountability in the skies." Applause broke from the gathered crowd as reporters shouted follow-up questions. Her attorney added, "We are pursuing full damages and regulatory reform. We will not settle in silence." Within the hour, Airworld's stock dropped another 5%. Investors demanded an emergency board meeting. Behind closed doors, the CEO stared at the latest market report, voice tight with urgency. "If this accelerates, we're facing federal penalties and class action exposure. Either we negotiate with Parker's team today, or the government will dictate the terms tomorrow." Phones buzzed across the table as a new headline broke on every major network. FAA schedules emergency hearing on Airworld discrimination case. The countdown to a federal showdown had officially begun. And the next move belonged to Danielle Parker. 48 hours later, Washington, D.C. buzzed with cameras and live feeds as the FAA convened an emergency public hearing. The packed chamber held federal investigators, airline attorneys, passenger witnesses, and a restless press corps. Danielle entered flanked by her attorney and two key witnesses from the flight. Phones flashed. Reporters called her name, but she walked straight to the front row, eyes locked on the panel of FAA commissioners. The chairperson struck the gavel. This emergency session will address alleged discriminatory actions aboard Airworld Flight 482. We will hear testimony from the passenger, crew members, and corporate representatives. All statements are under oath. The pilot was the first called. Wearing his Navy uniform, he took the stand with a stiff posture. A government attorney began the questioning. "Captain, did you order Ms. Parker to change seats without citing a documented safety or operational reason?" The pilot cleared his throat. "I acted on an operational concern." "What concern?" the attorney pressed. Silence stretched. Papers shuffled. I believed the weight distribution required adjustment," he finally said. The attorney held up the official flight audit. "This document shows no imbalance and confirms Ms. Parker's seat was within safety limits. Are you disputing the audit?" The pilot's jaw tightened. "No, I am not." "Then clarify, why did you single out this passenger?" The chamber went still. Cameras zoomed in. The pilot exhaled, voice lower now. "I received a verbal report from a gate agent suggesting a potential security risk. I acted to preempt disruption." The attorney's eyes narrowed. "Did you verify that report?" "No." "Did you ask for identifying details?" "No." The commissioner leaned forward. "So your decision to remove Ms. Parker was based solely on an unverified verbal comment?" "Yes," he admitted. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Flashbulbs erupted. The attorney continued. "Were you aware that 4 other passengers were reseated without record that evening?" The pilot hesitated. "No, I was not." "Were any of those passengers ordered to move for operational necessity?" "No." The chairperson's gavel struck once. "Let the record show the captain acknowledges no verified cause for his directive." The pilot shifted in his seat, beads of sweat forming under the chamber lights. Next, Danielle was sworn in. She detailed every step of the confrontation: her boarding, the unexplained order, her invocation of a flight audit. Her voice stayed steady, each fact precise. The FAA attorney asked the final question. "Ms. Parker, what remedy do you seek from this body?" Danielle looked directly at the commissioners. "I seek a federal mandate requiring airlines to document all passenger relocations and a public acknowledgement that discrimination, whether hidden under operational necessity or not, will not be tolerated in American airspace." The room erupted in applause before the chairperson's gavel restored order. Airworld's corporate counsel followed with a prepared statement of deep regret and promises of policy reform. But when pressed on disciplinary action, the attorney offered only, "The pilot remains on leave pending the outcome of this investigation." The chairperson announced a recess. "This panel will reconvene tomorrow for closing recommendations. Enforcement actions are on the table, including fines and license review." Gasps swept through the chamber. License review meant the pilot's career, and potentially Airworld's operating certificates, were now at stake. As cameras flashed and reporters surged forward, the pilot remained seated, eyes fixed on the table, his future hanging on the next day's verdict. Danielle rose slowly, her attorney placing a hand on her shoulder. The hearing was only paused, but the next session would decide careers, corporate policies, and the precedent for every flight in the country. The stakes had just climbed to cruising altitude. And when the FAA panel reconvened the next morning, the tension inside the federal hearing room was electric. Reporters filled every seat, cameras trained on the long oak dais as the commissioners filed in. Danielle Parker sat in the front row, calm but watchful, her attorney beside her. Across the aisle, the Airworld legal team shuffled papers in silence. The pilot sat rigidly, face pale under the bright studio lights. The chairperson struck the gavel. "This emergency hearing is now back in session." After reviewing testimony, evidence, and the full flight audit, the panel has reached a decision. A hush fell so complete it drowned the clicking cameras. The chairperson read from a prepared statement. "The Federal Aviation Administration finds Airworld Airlines in violation of federal anti-discrimination statutes. The order for Ms. Parker to vacate her assigned seat was without operational justification and constituted discriminatory treatment under federal law. The room erupted, gasps, flashes, hurried typing. The chairperson continued over the noise. Effective immediately, the FAA imposes the following actions. A civil penalty of $2.5 million against Airworld Airlines. A mandatory retraining for all flight crew on anti-bias procedures within 60 days. Immediate suspension of Captain Richard Gaines' commercial pilot license, pending further review. The pilot's head dropped, eyes fixed on the table. His attorney whispered furiously, but the words were lost in the rising swell of reaction. The chairperson added a final blow. Failure to implement these directives will result in the suspension of Airworld's interstate operating privileges. Reporters leapt to their feet. Microphones stretched forward. The FAA attorney turned to Danielle. Ms. Parker, the panel acknowledges your courage in bringing this incident to light. Your actions have directly influenced new federal guidelines to protect all passengers from discriminatory treatment. Applause broke out despite the chairperson's attempt to maintain order. Danielle stood briefly, nodding to the commissioners before sitting back down, her expression steady but resolute. Airworld CEO, who had remained silent until now, approached the podium. Airworld accepts the FAA's findings. We offer our deepest apologies to Ms. Parker and all passengers affected. Effective today, we are instituting a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory conduct. Captain Gaines has been relieved of duty. Questions exploded from the press gallery. Will the airline appeal the ruling? Is Captain Gaines permanently grounded? Will passengers receive compensation? The CEO paused only once. There will be no appeal. We will comply fully. Danielle's attorney issued a brief statement outside the chamber. This is not just a victory for my client, it's a victory for every passenger who has ever felt powerless in the face of authority. As microphones clustered around her, Danielle finally spoke. This was never about one seat on one flight. It was about dignity. And today, dignity won. The pilot was escorted out a side door, flanked by security, avoiding the cameras. His career now hung on the FAA's final license review. Outside, social media erupted. Hashtags #Flight Audit and #Danielle Parker dominated global trending lists within minutes. Airlines across the country quietly began emergency meetings to review their own policies. But even as Danielle stepped into the flash of cameras and the roar of cheers, the storm was not over. The FAA ruling had set a new national standard, and the next battleground would be the courtroom, where civil lawsuits were already being prepared. The fight for accountability had left the runway, but the turbulence ahead promised to be even more dangerous. After the FAA ruling rocked the industry, Danielle Parker took the fight one step higher. She filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Airworld, turning a single flight incident into a national reckoning. The case exploded across headlines. News networks ran nightly panels on racism in air travel. Lawmakers drafted emergency transparency bills. And one by one, former passengers from other airlines stepped forward with their own stories of unexplained seat changes. Then came the discovery phase. Internal Airworld emails showing years of passenger relocations marked as operational necessity with no safety reason at all. The evidence was devastating. Public outrage soared. Facing a courtroom defeat and a global PR disaster, Airworld agreed to a landmark settlement. They issued a nationwide public apology, paid a multi-million-dollar compensation package, and, at Danielle's insistence, funded an independent passenger rights oversight board. But Danielle didn't stop at a payout. She demanded permanent change. And she won. As part of the settlement, the FAA introduced the Flight Audit Protocol, a federal rule requiring every airline to log and publish every passenger relocation within 24 hours. Within months, carriers across the United States, and soon overseas, adopted the new standard. At her final press conference, Danielle faced a wall of cameras and said only this: "This was never just my fight. It's a blueprint to make sure no traveler is ever silenced or singled out again." Months later, she boarded her first flight since that night. The gate agent smiled and welcomed her by name. She took her seat, her rightful seat, as a passenger across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for what you did." Danielle looked out at the runway, engines rumbling beneath her feet. A single unjust order to move had sparked a movement that forced an entire industry to move forward. Her journey began with a flight. It ended with a victory that will protect millions of travelers for years to come. And if this story moved you as much as it moved millions of passengers around the world, don't just watch, take action. Hit like to show that dignity in the air matters. Tap subscribe and help us reach 1 million strong so we can keep exposing the hidden stories that shape our lives. And ring the notification bell so you never miss the next fight for justice. Because every view, every share, every subscriber is a step toward change.